You mentioned Erasmus, which is one of the epigraphs that begins your chapters. And I'm just kind of curious in general about those. Like every chapter begins with a quote from something. And some of them are TV series. I had to ask you about it because I didn't know.
Yeah.
Others are much more famous literary references that immediately I recognize. So I'm curious, like, what was your thought process? How did you pick those? Why this diversity of them? How do they work in the book?
I don't know how they work, but I'll tell you this. I came upon the idea from reading 16th, 17th, and 18th century books, mostly 18th century novels. If you read Tom Jones, you can see some of those epigraphs. Many of them, whether they're in Tom Jones or they're elsewhere, um, might be in Greek. They might be in Latin, uh, and and the like. But yeah, I was kind of inspired to try out that approach. But then, and I'm not sure if this worked consistently throughout. My selection was based on the content of the chapters. I was looking for a hook. I was looking for something, in some cases, very literary. There's a couple of there are three important Shakespeare quotes in there, and one of them reflects directly on the relationship between Howard and his wife Sally. It's kind of a petulance in that relationship, a kind of War of the Roses kind of thing. And the Shakespeare quote that I chose, I kind of previewed that, I hope. Um, the final chapter, um, the Macbeth quote, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow reflects and, if you will, projects on um, the very end, not only of the book but of Howard's life and his life as a carpenter. You could I could see him struggling. I could see that he wanted to keep going. Um, uh, the prostate cancer came back, and then it came back again, and he struggled to keep going, but he couldn't make it to the shop every day. But um, yeah, there was something about that quote uh, that suggested to me a kind of a desperation. I want to keep going, but pretty soon there's not going to be anything to live for. Uh, and then, of course, the graveyard scene quote. Uh, you know, uh, who builds better than a carpenter? You know, or gallows maker. Yeah, it just really seemed to fit. I'm a Dickens man, and I've got at least one Dickens quote in there that reflects on the character of Howard, um, and some of them are kind of insouciant, or um, they're meant to be funny. Um, are you talking to me, or um, the famous quote from uh, uh, what the heck is the name of the movie? I can't think of it. Um,
You talking to me? Is that Taxi Driver?
That's Taxi Driver.
Okay.
But the one I'm thinking of is Clint.
Oh, Clint Eastwood, sure.
That's right.
Dirty Harry.
Yeah. And it fit because um, Howard had two sides to him. He was a gentle and quiet and generous man. But sometimes, if he got angry, or if he found himself confronted by someone behaving like a jerk, or insisting that Howard um, build something um, his way rather than the way Howard knew it had to be built, he'd explode. He'd get really angry. And that particular quote kind of led into that a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know. There was something quirky about using that approach. In a way, I suppose you could say it was starchy filler, but it became something more than that as I went on. It became almost, for every chapter, thematic, you know, and kind of a preview of coming attractions.
I always enjoyed that when I mean, I studied with you, so like I know some of the older books, and I definitely came to appreciate those epigraphs. And I think for me, it's almost like, I don't know, as a reader, it was kind of a look behind the curtain, like, hey, here's upcoming attractions, kind of like how long the titles used to be, where they spelled out a summary of exactly what the chapter is going to be.
Right. Yeah.
But then it was also kind of a challenge to the reader to figure out, like, how does this fit? You know, why did I bother? And so, like, that's what I found myself doing with your book is like, okay, he's referencing Shakespeare. Okay, I know enough about the play and this context to kind of see what maybe is coming. Oh, he did something that I expected, but a little bit different. Or like, I think it's Farscape is the space one. I was like, what the hell is this one? I don't even know what this is.
But there was trouble up there, and so it really did work. But I guess one of my favorite ones was the quote from the preface of Don Quixote, and you and I both labored over that in class, that preface, and how incredibly important it is to the satirical approach of the book. It's easy to blow up a dog, but it's really difficult to write a book. And there's a double message in there to the reader about the direction that this book is going to be taking. And the other part of using that Quixote quote is that Cervantes was a devotee of Erasmus as well. And so it's kind of a tip of the hat to that. Yeah.
Cool.